he asked us what business we're in. We're in the business of making money. And video games is the vehicle we chose to do so. And I remember like the metaphorical slap in the face.
Welcome, everyone, to the Amazing Teams podcast, where we talk about all things that make work better. Today, I'm joined by Martin Gourdeau, CEO of Vacation Tracker. Martin came into Vacation Tracker about 10 months ago to help scale a bootstrap, fully remote SaaS company across 6 countries. Before that, he spent 4 years at WorkLeap, most recently as president and general manager, where he helped lead a major rebrand and ran their performance product. Today, we're going to talk about something he's thought about a lot in his career: how being radically transparent about business reality, including money and hard decisions, changes the culture you end up with. Martin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Una. Pleasure to be on.
So tell me more about 10 months into your new role. What are you focused on at Vacation Tracker?
Yes, coming up to almost a year now. The focus is on growth. We're about 20 people. We're doing pretty well, to be honest. We're approaching like 3 million ARR, about a few thousand paying customers. We have customers in just over 100 countries. So it's a super incredible like sandbox to play in. All focus is on growing your business.
Starting with that transparency, right? You guys share your revenue numbers, your customers, everything. Was that the case before you joined, or did you open up that playbook?
It was quite transparent before in terms of like values and how we run a business. I was already quite aligned with the two co-founders. I mean, I think it's not necessarily a question for Vacation Tracker being more transparent. It's more about what to share. What I'm trying to change a little bit more is talking about our position in the market, our strategy, our playbook, why it makes sense from a business perspective. I'm just trying to open up like the horizon a bit more to have like a very open conversation about our position in the market versus our competitors, and our ideal customer profile and stuff like that.
It's fun because we had Love on the podcast, feels like forever ago, probably a couple years ago. So it's fun to hear, okay, changing of the guards, new person in. And before we go into transparency, I wanted to ask you, speaking of your positioning, your tagline on your LinkedIn profile, it says time off is a performance strategy, not a reward. Unpack that for me and for our listeners.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And
so if you look at the product that we sell today, it could be interpreted in a very tactical way of we basically simplify leave management for SMBs. And that's exactly what we do. If you look at it at first level, it kind of reconnects to the reason that, drawing me to join the business is the more aspirational aspect of it, which is, it's a bit more strategic, I think, for businesses as well. Is with everything going on in the market and all these new tools that are coming out, we can all feel like this like augmented need to perform better and to do more. And it's kind of funny because everyone's talking about like AI to replace us. And, everything I've been seeing up to now is, for me anyways, I'm just working more and the people in the team are just working more because the bar is, keeps on raising, and these expectations of using all these tools and deliver 5 or, 10x more than before. So that calls on people's energy, right? And energy management becomes a thing that's very important. And that's how this circles back to the tagline. I think SMBs in particular are under tremendous pressure right now to deliver more with less. And that takes a toll on teams' energy levels. And we're at the forefront of helping manage that, basically.
I'm curious, what is the vacation policy at a company that helps others with their leave management? What's your guys' vacation policy at Vacation Tracker?
That's a good question. It's the first time I think someone asked me that. So I've worked in many companies that had like the unlimited, that are not really unlimited vacations. And I really appreciate the approach. We basically have a flat policy. So everyone has the same number of days. It's quite generous. I think it's 20 days. So 20 days for everyone. Plus, obviously stat holidays and we slow down the business during like Christmas and stuff like that. But we went with a very easy to manage, low overhead. I think that was the intent, is like a very low overhead, very easy to manage policy, which is 20 days a year for everyone. You could be like straight out of school and I have the same policy as the guy that's straight out of school. So it's very fair for everyone. And it's actually pretty great.
Nice. So it's worked out for you guys. You're not changing it in your new role. You're like, this works.
No plans to change it. Yeah.
Okay, now onto the transparency. When did this become a thing that you believe in? That transparency is how you want to run businesses?
Yeah. And I just want to be clear about the type of transparency that I'm talking about here is really like the business reality. And like you said in your introduction, it's more about business metrics and how the business is run and the objectives and how people relate to that and teams relate to that. So I think when you talk about like radical transparency, it could be interpreted in many different ways. It could be in like performance management. It could be in, a bunch of various ways. But the one I'm talking about today is really with regards to what's going on in the business, in the market reality, like you said, profitability, the concept of, people that drive revenue and objectives and how the business can be run in relationship with those numbers. I was always exposed to various degrees in my previous experiences, specifically thinking of more early on in my career. I started working like out of school at this very small company. It was like a service company, about 20 people. And it was basically a complete black box. All I knew was I had to do my job and I had to negotiate my salary. And I had no idea if the business was profitable or not. I had no idea who owned the business, what their ambitions were. So it's very hard to be aligned, right? Like you just have your heads down and you just do your day-to-day thing. And then in my first big experience, in a not big experience, but in a larger company was at Electronic Arts. And this was around 2005-ish, 2005, 2006. And we were creating this new studio, which was awesome because I saw the creation of a new culture. I was like in the first 15 or 20 employees, and then we scaled up to about 800 people over 5 years. But like that 800, we were a small part of a much bigger business, right? Even back then, I don't know what the headcount is now, but back then it was 10,000 employees. Publicly listed, publicly traded. So it's very, big business. And the first year or so, I was exposed to this awesome culture that we created in the Montreal studio. It was basically we created our own culture. It was very creative and high performance, hard working. But again, there was no like financial context to what we were doing, right? And funny anecdote, one of the first trips that I did to our headquarters in California, I had a technical role at the time. It was my first time managing a team, so my first managing experience. And I was managing my team, kind of aligning with the culture that we built in Montreal, right? Which was making great games, the highest quality as possible, and try to produce the next big hit, right? So I get flown into headquarters for this like centralization alignment meeting thing with maybe 15 or 20 people that had the same role as me in a bunch of studios around the world. We had all these workshops and super interesting. And at a certain point, the CFO, like global CFO of EA, I don't remember his name, but super cool guy. He asked to have like 30 minutes with our team. And I found it kind of odd because he was basically running a business from a financial perspective. So he walks in the room and does like a quick introduction. And then he asked us what business we're in. So everyone's like kind of shy raising their hand of like, well, video games. And then some people say like entertainment. And he's like, no, like just shutting everyone down. Everyone gives these ideas. And he's like, I'm always going to remember this quote. He's like, we're in the business of making money. And video games is the vehicle we chose to do so. And I remember the cold shower that rained upon the entire room. And he was basically speaking on behalf of the global leadership team and it being a public company that worked for its shareholders. And I remember like the metaphorical slap in the face of like coming from this, like the local studio that we were working with these artists that were super passionate about the craft and the video games. And then you get this kind of reality check from, a very high level person. And then he went around the room and explained all various responsibilities of each studio, how they were contributing to this objective. And I remember when he got to Montreal, I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like, we opened your studio so you can provide 80% of the quality for 60% of the cost. It was basically a low cost location and they wanted decent quality. And that was the expectation. And I had never heard that at the local studio. And I was like, why? Like, why is this not shared in our day to day because like it's very important and it's alignment with the business. And it's that moment on. I remember it so clearly because it really kind of marked me. And I understood of like, okay, you might not be aligned with this, but this is where the company's going. And this is our reason of being in the company. Many things made a lot of sense because we were working at a level, locally in Montreal under like the general manager, basically, which I had a great relationship with. But he was running the studio the best way he thought to, extract the most out of the people. So there's like this abstraction layer between, the public company financial objectives and the culture that, he tried to create locally. And it was my first experience where I saw kind of the disconnect there. And I think, all these like dots starting to connect after that. And, I could have been in a position where I was like super passionate about video games and this was like way too, like profit oriented and you could interpret that however you will. I decided to like buy in. I was like, okay, this is the company I just work for. This is their objective. This is what we're going through right now. We need to like get the share price back up. And this is the reality. And there are like consequences. And the CFO didn't just drop this, it had matter to do with like how much we could borrow to make better gains. And it was like this big wheel in motion. And he explained the whole thing in like 20 minutes. And it was just so enlightening. And I came back to Montreal in a completely different mindset and it helped me do my job. Like I understand my position in the machine of Montreal and its position in the machine. And that was like really a defining moment. And I tried to kind of embrace that. I could see from that point on people in the Montreal studio that were not aligned with this philosophy. And they were trying to build 100% quality games at 80% of the cost, right? And there was like a disconnect in the day to day. And you could actually see that disconnect because that was never communicated. So yeah, it was just like a kind of a short glimpse of my experience that was like the moment where I realized that was important, basically.
Now, some people might say, being that transparent, I don't want to do it when things are bad, or I don't want to do it when I feel like it will affect people negatively. Like what the CFO shared could have landed on someone of this is ridiculous. It wasn't the business I thought I was in and I'm out. Right. So I think people will like people in leadership will be like wary of or leery of sharing that because like, well, what if it's bad? Or what if we're having a bad financial year and now people are going to start looking for a new job? How do you think about that when it's like kind of things that you're not really necessarily excited to share?
Yeah, and I think that was one of those things, right? I don't think that was the ideal message that the CFO wanted to pass along, but he made the decision to treat us like adults, basically, and like this is the context of the business. This is the reality we operate in. This is our reality now. This is what I need from you, from each studio, and I guess it depends on your personality type and where you're at and when you want. But get back to your question, I think if you hear that message and it doesn't resonate at all, or you're shocked or offended by it, it's actually better that maybe you find something else, like another opportunity where you can engage with and you're going to be, fully on board. Because if you stay and you're disconnected from the business reality, like the fact that you don't like it doesn't change the fact that that's the situation, right? So putting this shield and it could seem like protecting you from that reality. The thing is, in the day to day, that's how the business will be run. So in the day to day, there's going to be these friction points that are going to be constant and kind of painful. And it's not going to be fun for you as an employee that's misaligned, and it's not going to be fun for the business. And then it's probably going to lead to like some kind of performance, conversation. And it's probably best for both parties if, that relationship kind of ends there. If you're deeply misaligned with where the business is and what it's trying to achieve at that point in time, it's probably best for both parties to like just move on. So sometimes it's a difficult conversation to have, but you have to own where your business is. Like pretending that it's in a better situation is not a service for anybody.
In that room, if you can transport yourself back to that conversation with the CFO, could you feel your peers having that reaction of, oh, I had no idea and I don't necessarily want to be part of it?
It was very mixed. I think some people, like I remember, like the LA studio, they were closer to like HQs in San Francisco, I think it still is. And they were like spending more time there. So they were closer to that reality. I think they probably heard that message before. So there was like basically no reaction. Right? And then you could feel like geographically, the furthest you were away from HQ, the shot was a little bit bigger, which is kind of funny. But I think, yeah, it varied. It varied quite a bit. I think almost everyone was on board at the end of that talk. There was a lot of questions and a lot of, pushing back. And the CFO was really okay with it. He was just answering very clearly to the questions. It was just an honest and open, refreshing conversation. When he said it at first, obviously, it was a bit of a slap, a bit of a shock. And I think that's actually what he wanted to promote. But the message, definitely landed.
Mm-hmm. So now, since then, you've obviously led teams, you've led companies, you're running a company right now. What are some of the behaviors and things that you do in your day-to-day job across those roles to maintain that transparency and build that transparency? Like, do you have, quarterly all hands where you share the financials? Do you have things you do every week? What are the practices that you might have to continue building that transparency with your teams?
Yeah. It depends on the business. Like, right now at Vacation Tracker, we're a smaller team, so which is great because I can over communicate, and everyone knows everything else, which is pretty awesome. So, like, I think almost every week I communicate like these like core metrics for growth of the business, like MR, churn, stuff like that. And then every month, yeah, there's an all hands, with everyone, which is kind of a same version as that weekly communication, but we just go a bit more in depth. We look at our objectives for the year, where we're at, and there's like this Q&A session where anyone can ask anything, basically. And I think you just have to adapt to the business that you're in, right? If you're in a bigger business, the weekly thing obviously doesn't work. When I was at Workleap, I was doing monthly town halls with about like 450 people. And we had this special guest of like, let's say product comes in or marketing comes in and presents like some big thing that they achieved with working on. But the common denominator was at the end of the meeting, whoever presented, I was always one of the presenters, but if I had product or sales or whoever with me present, we would all say at the end for a very open Q&A where I would invite the whole company to ask any questions and actually invite the hard ones, right? Because those are the good questions that you want to ask, because chances are, if you're hesitant to ask a difficult question, there's a bunch of other people that have the same question that are scared to ask it, right? So, and yeah, we had built this incredible culture of quite open transparency of like where the business is at, what the reality is, what the challenges are. And yeah, sometimes you have tough questions of like, if you don't achieve X, like what are the consequences? And I would just answer very blunt, like these are the consequences. And there's a way to be transparent and not, kind of doomy-gloomy, you can be factual and keep your heads up and stay positive and have, trust and confidence in the plan. But a question is asked, I'll answer it. And I always used to tell everyone, like, don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. And people at first didn't understand, and then they kind of got it after a few questions that they didn't really want the answer to. But yeah, I think you have to adapt to the size of the business and the reality.
What are the things that are off limits? Are there any that you just don't share? Not you, but the company shouldn't. Maybe salaries or I don't know, bonuses. Like, what are the things you're like, you know what, this is just private?
Well, anything that's specific to a person, I think is off limits when it comes to like the personal side of it. If it's the person's performance in the business and the impact of that, like obviously I would not point out like a person by name and shine a light on their lack of performance and the effect on the business in a town hall. That would not make any sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
A team, I think a team should be accountable in front of the whole company in terms of like the performance and their effects. In terms of like information sharing, I mean, down to like people's salary, like I would not go to the TS like I know some companies explored like wide open, like, salary,
Open comp.
super open policies. To me, that's infringing on like your personal information, and I would say maybe disrespectful, but it's just like it's not for me to share that information. I think if people want to talk about it openly, they can do it. But your revenue, your personal revenue, has an impact on like you and your family, and to me, that's personal information. But anything other than that, is like free game.
What do you think most leaders get wrong about being transparent and building some sort of that sort of culture?
I think it's the purpose. It's not being transparent just to be transparent. It's why. Like, why are you sharing this information? And I started doing it just to get the most out of my team, to give them the context and treat everyone like adults, right? I don't like having filtered information. I like to have all the information. So that's how I treat people. And it's not like you have to be very careful not to go into like this building a culture guru kind of situation, where you're transparent just to be transparent, to be trendy kind of thing. Um, I started doing it purely for like performance reasons. And I found
Yeah.
that if you hire the right people and you give them all the information, they perform better. So it's a very, performance oriented.
And let's say someone hasn't shared a lot of information with their team. They could be vacation tracker size or bigger, and they're like, we've never shared, maybe they've shared revenue, but like nothing else. Where would you recommend someone starts? Because I feel like, a show up and throw up approach probably would not be best. It's like, let me tell you everything. How should a person start?
Small and let people ask questions. Like I would always open the floor and say, is there something you never asked that you think is off limits? The worst case is I'll say it's off limits, but ask
Mhm.
the question. Like it doesn't cost anything to ask a question. So I'd actually try to find out what people want to know, because that's always interesting to me. And if you do it in a proactive way, don't go for like this big reveal, right? Go for like small things and the effects of those small things on a business versus some big revelation information that's never been shared. And then people are trying to figure out why now? Why are you sharing this big thing now? And then they'll try to like fill in the blank on their own. I found that, yeah, that has a tendency to happen. And that's a common theme of like any kind of information shared, right? If there's anything you don't share, people will fill in the void. So yeah, if you do a big reveal, make sure it's attached to like a big event or some big thing that's going on. Don't do a big reveal just for the sake of being transparent. So start small, basically.
That's a really good point of people will guess. They're gonna stir rumors about, people are gonna fill in the missing pieces. It's kind of like culture. Like culture, like if you're not intentional about it, it will just emerge. There's no point in which a company doesn't have a culture. Same thing with information. If you don't share it, people are gonna start guessing, oh, what's happening to Martin? Is he leaving? Is this right? And then that's no good.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it's like a human personality or trait that you always assume the worst or almost the worst. So when there's like an information vacuum, your brain goes in all these directions. You try to prepare
Yeah.
for the worst. I think it's probably like a survival thing. And almost every time that I had like an information vacuum on my end and it gets spilled, it's always better than what I expected. So it's like, and I think that concept can relieve a lot of stress. The communication itself is probably going to come as a relief.
Do you feel like leading this way by sharing everything has made you a better leader? And the reason why I ask is I feel like when you're being open with people and sharing everything from the business strategy and how they fit in, you kind of got to have your stuff together, right? You have to have it thought through. Otherwise, people are going to be like, well, Martin says the business is not doing well and he has no idea what to do next. That is not reassuring, right? But you can, like, if you're being transparent, like, hey guys, we're tanking and I'm at a loss. Any ideas? Let me know, right? Doesn't always feel
No, that I mean, and that's kind of your job, and in any kind of leadership role, you need to have at least some kind of plan. If you're completely clueless, I mean, to be frank, you probably shouldn't be in that role. If you had absolutely no idea what you were doing, but it's a good point. So to answer your question, yes, because once you start communicating in a more open way, one, the way you do it, you can't communicate clearly if it's not clear in your head. So it forces you to be structured and clear in your head of like where the business is at, what our challenges are, what the priorities of those challenges are, what we can do to address those challenges. So yes, it for sure helps you to be a better leader and to make better decisions. I remember like especially at work week, because we were a bigger team and especially in person, although we didn't do the Q&A in person, but we did these gatherings. I think they still do today, but once or twice a year, we did these gatherings and you're on a stage, in front of 450 people. Your thoughts better be clear, right?
yeah.
You can't have like all your notes, like at home, I'd have like some notes lying around and you have a reference point, but presenting like where the business is at and where our biggest challenges are and what the consequences of those challenges are in front of like a couple hundred people, you really have to get your shit together basically. And everything has to be very structured in your head. And it's kind of a forcing function of
Yeah.
clear faith. So yes.
And you know what? I don't think you have to have the answer as a leader. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes it's okay to also ask people for help. Like I remember
Of
listening
course.
to Cotopaxi, Cotopaxi, the outdoor retail company, the colorful stuff. And I remember listening to their founder talk about 2020 and how no one was going anywhere, let alone buying a backpack to go hiking, right? And things just went bad, right? They were like a month away from just going out of business. And he presented to the whole company and said, "Hey guys, it's pretty bad out there. If anyone has any ideas, like let's go, let's brainstorm." And someone came up with those colorful masks that people were wearing for a while that said "Do good," and they sold so many because there was such a shortage of masks, and it really kept the company afloat until people started traveling again. So like he was open and he was like, "All comers, ideas, let's go, all hands on deck." So you don't have to always be like know what to do next because sometimes you just don't, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a very extreme example, right? There was like a
Exactly.
big event, and
Exactly.
it's the one exception to what I said earlier of like if you have no idea what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be in that seat.
Yep.
I think like for example, everything that happened during COVID, I mean, it just nuked a bunch of businesses, and I think a lot of people had no idea how to react to it. It's a once in a lifetime thing. To me, that's
Yes,
an
for
exception.
sure.
But to get back to your point, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of like during these Q&As that I've done throughout my career where someone asks a really tough question, you're completely blindsided, and or it's a very specific metric, and I don't know. Like the answer is I don't know, and I'll get back to you. I'll look into it. I agree it's important. I don't know the answer. I'll get back to you. And we I do these like a follow up process, and share the question and the answer to the entire committee. And it's okay. Like and sometimes you actually don't know the answer, even if with some research. If it's a metric, you can look up the metric. If it's a more strategic
Mhm.
decision or
Yep.
question, and you just don't have an answer yet, maybe the answer is I don't have an answer yet, and you give a timeline as to like when to have an answer, and don't hold yourself accountable to that question. But yeah, I mean, no one has all the answers, right? And it's okay. It's part of building that trust of you not bullshitting. Basically, in most
Yeah.
Q and A's
Yeah.
is actually saying, you don't have the answer. We don't have the answer.
How do you get clear on the objectives and the priorities? Do you have, kind of think in the dark? Do you write? Do you go for a walk? How do you get clear?
In the day to day, I think it's really blocking some time to actually work. Like it's easy in positions like this, it's easy to have like a fully booked calendar and you just like back to back every day doing meetings and making decisions, and you can get kind of lost in that. I'm like, why did I decide this again? And you lose context basically. You stop seeing, the forest. So yeah, blocking time, never having a full day of back to back meetings, I think is quite important. That's in the day to day. And then having these rituals, right? Because again, that forcing function that I talked about earlier. If you have a monthly meeting, all hands, okay, take a step back. What are our objectives? We're 6 months in the year. We just have on this week, actually. First week of July, the halfway mark of the year. This is where we span our, financial objectives, strategic objectives. This is where we're at. It kind of forces you having those rituals to be very, very clear as to where we're at, what the priorities are, and how the business is, running itself.
You worked with people from all over the world. You still do. How does sharing this information land on different cultures? And any kind of insights do you have of like, okay, if you're working with a diverse team, not every country or not every culture is used to knowing exactly how much the company is making in
Yeah,
top line and bottom line.
yeah, it's a good point. I think the end result is usually the same, meaning that when you walk through the why with those various people from different cultures, they'll understand like the purpose of sharing
Mhm.
that information, and they'll eventually buy in. Hopefully, if you hire the right person and there's a good culture fit, and it's something that you could size for and test in the interview process, I think. But yeah, I mean, some cultures have different reactions to knowing these numbers and like how much money the business is actually making. And I think most of the time it's just refreshing. And you have these questions of mostly I think in European cultures, I think bottom line is not like shared very often, like how much actual money we're making. So you might get these like very um like kind of first reaction questions of like, well, where's this money go? And always like, is that like just like profit? Is that like dividends? And it's like, well, it could be, but no, we choose to reinvest, in our growth. And if you have ideas, we have money, and we're in a very lucky position to have money to invest in our growth. We choose to spend the money this way, right? And in another more lifestyle business, it could be, yeah, we take out like 20% in dividends a year and goes to our shareholders, and maybe we'll have a profit sharing, or it depends on the context of that business, right? But again, I think it's just a healthy conversation to have. It varies with the cultures, but usually it's quite refreshing, I think.
Exactly. I mean, I can't imagine anyone saying, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to know all this information. Don't share this with me," right? It's like,
I
feels,
mean,
why would you not
yeah,
want to know?
I don't see the context where that happens. Like I
Exactly.
don't want to know.
Exactly.
Maybe if you're like super anxious and you don't want to know, like, for borderline profitable, you don't want to know for in the red. Maybe like a very anxious personality type. But yeah, I again communicating like what's the plan if we do go in the red and we have a backup, we have like this cash cushion, and it's good
Yeah,
for X amount of months, and like we have railway, and again, communication is usually the answer to all those things.
exactly. What are you focused on next at Vacation Tracker? What does the next 6 months or 7 months of the year look like strategically for you guys?
Yeah, I think well, it's kind of what I talked about just now, and that's our actual position, right? We're a profitable bootstrap business focusing on growth, so finding growth levers. We're playing around quite a bit with everything that's kind of integrating in AI workflows right now. So, for example, like we built this NCP server that for example Cloud can connect to, and you can play around with the data in Vacation Tracker from your cloud workspace. So, for example, like this morning I woke up, I had stable tax, and it goes through all my meetings in the week and says if there's anyone missing by calling like Vacation Tracker, and what I could do to like mitigate those people that are off, or any natural holidays in countries that we operate in. And it reads my emails. It's connected to like all my tools, including Vacation Tracker. I think this whole like headless software movement is very high potential. I think it's very early on. I don't think many people have adopted it yet, but it's one of the growth levers that we identify. And there's many others I mentioned early on in our top energy management. So we're building all these tools for better energy management. We're launching kind of team lead views for energy states of people in their teams. So you'll be able to see like energy trends for people in your teams and projections in time. So if you have like important products coming up, you can start planning your operations with regards to if you have like a key person that hasn't taken vacation in 9 months, there's a flag there, right? So we're trying to get closer to the flow of work and ultimately, providing more value for our customers.
That's super fun. Well, Martin, we always end the podcast the same way, which is in Hey Taco, everyone has 5 tacos to give to someone every day to say thank you and appreciate them. So, my question to you is you have 5 tacos. Who would you like to give them today and why?
You're putting me on the spot.
Exactly. That's usually, probably a person or people have already popped into your mind just me asking that question. By the way, you can give one person all your 5 tacos if they really knocked it out of the park. You can distribute them as you see fit, but 5 is all you got.
Okay. So people I work with.
It doesn't matter. It could be your spouse, it could be your parents, it could
Oh,
be
wow.
your neighbor for, taking out your trash can last night when you forgot. It could be anyone.
Um, okay. So that in that case, I have to give my first taco to my wife. My wife works in HR, and she just started a new position, but she was a performance coach for executives. She had started her own business and she ran that for a few years. And I feel like she provided free service to me as my performance coach. She helps quite a bit in everything that's managing people and growing a business, and because it's her expertise, is what she
Mhm.
does. So that's one for sure. But I would give a taco to our salesperson Daniela, who absolutely exploded the last month in terms of her sales figures. She just she did a great job, and it helps the business a lot. She's a great person to work with, full of energy and full of drive. So that's 2 tacos. I would give a taco each to the 2 co-founders of the
Mhm.
business, Sobadan and Lav. One, they're great to work with. I've known them for a long time, and there wasn't too much risk in terms of like alignment me walking into the business because I knew the guys before. But they're even cooler to work with than I expected. And I know it's not easy to do like the transition that they did, especially Lab that stepped down from CEO. But yeah, they're just incredible people to work with, and they're ready to do anything to take the business to the next level. And my last tackle, I would split to the whole team. Our team does an incredible job. We have people in 7 countries, I think. We're fully distributed. And even with that setup, we actually have a pretty cool culture, and it's just a great place to work.
I mean, those were some meaty tacos that you came up with on the spot. Those were great. Well, Martin, thank you for coming on the podcast and for sharing what you believe about transparency and telling us more about Vacation Tracker. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening. One of the important things about building a team is gratitude. If you're looking to add more gratitude into your team, check out heytaco.com. We are clearly biased, but it really does work. Use the code AMAZINGTEAMS to receive 15% off for the first 3 months of your subscription.